So this is the recorded part that you need to stay tuned until we actually start. So I'm going to put this on pause. So hi, nonprofit leaders, just stay tuned. All right, so we are recording again. Now I'm going to share a screen. But let me just look at these cute people. I just love seeing people. And I think I can't see everybody, obviously. And Haley's here under Austin Wildlife. Sharon, hi, John. It's nice to see everybody, goodness. All right, I'm gonna share a screen so that we can get started. And I was trying to explain this a minute ago. People with Macs somehow have much better ways of doing this than I do. So it always takes me a minute. In other words, slideshow from beginning. Okay, now somebody tell me, are we still going? And do we now have a slideshow?
Yes, and you are recording.
Okay, all right, everything's good. We'll go ahead and get started since it is 12, it's actually 12:17. And welcome everybody, welcome to Austin Nonprofit Meetup. We have some new folks here again today, so I always take about 30 to 45 seconds to do some introductions of myself and Austin Nonprofit. I am Nancy Manning, founder of Austin Nonprofit Meetup, Empower Your Mission. I practiced law for 25 years in Rapid City, South Dakota, while serving on 3 nonprofit boards. Also during that time period, I owned the only mediation and training center in Rapid City for, well, about 16 of those years. When I moved to Austin, Texas, I began managing nonprofits as an executive director, did that for about 8 years. Then in 2014, started Power Your Mission as a consultant for nonprofits. And in 2018, founded Austin Nonprofit Meetup. So let me tell you a little bit about our format that we use in this meetup. It changes because I like to keep it interesting. So sometimes I'm the sole presenter. Sometimes I have a co-presenter. And sometimes we have panels of speakers, and that gets pretty exciting. I'm going to quote Shannon on this. We have had some real big time grant funders. We have had some big time corporate sponsors. And these are the types of folks that give you a little look behind the scenes of how, those little tips and secrets about soliciting money from those folks. So we get those going once in a while. And then another format we use is networking. And we've done it once in November, and I think we'll do it again in June. And that is where we just, as a group, it's totally free. And we get together and collaborate and commiserate and support one another. So that's how Austin Nonprofit goes. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. My Zoom co-hostess with the mostest is Shannon Mantrim from Leap to Success. And this month, I'm asking Shannon to go ahead and introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her magic dust. And because a lot of people don't understand what an amazing resource she is for our nonprofit. So go for it, Miss Shannon.
Thank you, Nancy. Oh, I gotta let somebody in. I am Shannon Mantrim. I am the fairly new executive director for Launchpad Job Club. Launchpad's been around for 20 years. It was originally a resource program of Texas Workforce Solutions and has been around for 20 years. And for the last 8 years, though, I've been the program manager for Leap to Success. That program started out of the Great Recession. If you hadn't done something like programming for 6 months, you were considered completely worthless and rusty and unhireable. And so the techie kind of people got together and decided to start doing pro bono short-term professional projects for other nonprofits. And so I've been leading that program for the last 8 years. We've done websites, we've done databases, we've done financial plans, reviews, we've done research, pretty much anything professional that a nonprofit would need, some help with that we can do in a relatively quick time frame because people may go to work. So we try to make them about 12 weeks or so for our projects. So I will put my information, or I'll put the website in the chat. And you can go into the contact area. There's a form you can fill out, and I will get with you, and we will do our best to get your project staffed quickly to help you with whatever is bugging you that you know you can't handle and you can't afford. Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, Shannon. And I'll just mention that when I worked for Travis Audubon, Shannon provided me a woman who I now call my Excel queen. That was back in, boy, I don't know, 2009 or 10. And that lady still helps me out, even though I'm not even running a nonprofit anymore. So she has some phenomenal people that she'll place with you. All right, now, here's something else about the chat box, and I want a little bit more housekeeping. I suddenly have no access to the chat box because I think what the deal is, on my laptop, when I start sharing the screen, everything else goes away except for I see a few of you. So there is a drop-down menu in your chat box where you can chat with Shannon if you need to, like if there's some kind of issue like that. But otherwise, I'm not going to be able to see the chat box until later when I invite you to either turn on your mics and your videos to ask me questions, or you put it in the chat box, then I'll stop sharing. But I'll prompt you so you'll know when that's going to happen, okay? So in the toolkit, I just wanted to point out, and I was going to ask you a question about this, but now I realize I can't because I don't have a chat box. We had these videos that I'm hoping you had a chance to get started on them. Most of these are super short videos. I think the silos one is maybe 3 minutes, and the get into teams with your staff is like 8.5. Calling a circle is 12 minutes. But anyway, a lot of these videos, the reason why I've got them up there is they're foundational for what we're going to be doing today. So I hope you do get a chance to do that, to watch those. All right, let us go ahead and get started with our topic, the 3 things that you need to fundraise like a rock star. And I am actually going to turn off my, can I turn off my video from here? Isn't that weird, Shannon? You know what? I have these issues when I do my live videos during, just a minute. Oh, I make myself laugh because I'm so terrible at this.
I can stop your video. I'll try. I hope I don't take anything else with me.
Yeah, I like, oh, there, stop video. There we go. All right. No, I'm still there. I'm still, am I still there? Shannon, are you trying to do it?
I will not touch it again.
Okay, here, stop video. All right, this helps me to focus on the content, guys. All right, so here's what you need to fundraise like a rock star. Knowledge, tools, and motivation. And today, I'm going to be giving you a roadmap. In each step along the way of your roadmap, you will find one or more of these 3 things, knowledge, tools, or motivation. We're going to be taking 5 steps along your roadmap today. And those 5 steps are what you are going to use to raise funds from any or all of those 9 primary revenue streams for your nonprofit. Let's take a quick look at what those 9, quick view is what I'm calling it. 9 primary revenue streams. Notice there's lots under individual donors, but I'm calling all those individual donor programs. And we will be drilling down throughout the year on these different revenue streams. We've done a little bit on grants. We've done stuff on corporate partners. We're going to do more of that. We'll be doing employee giving programs, planned giving. Each one of these revenue streams involves those 3 factors of knowledge, tools, and motivation. And you'll see as we go along. And today you're going to come away with the 5 steps you need for every one of these 9 primary revenue streams. Now remember, roadmaps usually have a legend. So I'm going to give you 2 legends before we actually take the first step. The first is this legend. It's language. So let's make sure that we understand our language. There is a difference, an important difference between resource development and fundraising. Resource development is the broader term and is all about building and sustaining relationships. So let me just take a second here, tell a little quick story. You know, as someone who works in the nonprofit world, which I did for well over 30 years, you always hear that thing about fundraising is all about building relationships. Well, you know how sometimes things are in your head for a long time before gravity works and you really start getting what it means? I remember the day when I was working for Travis Audubon. We were in this teensy weensy little office back in those days. It's 2007. And I was having this lovely conversation with a donor on the phone. And all of a sudden, in the middle of that conversation, I realized, oh, this is what they mean by building a relationship. This woman was lovely. The conversation was uplifting. That's what it is. Okay. So we talk about building relationships, but we have to make sure we get it out of our head, right? And that gravity works. Resource development involves how your nonprofit develops and maintains internal and external relationships. Important to its mission and program success, it involves development of your nonprofit board in understanding and complying with its responsibility to ensure adequate resources for your nonprofit. It involves cultivating professional development among staff to understand and engage in resource development. It includes developing external collaborative partnerships with stakeholders in your community. And it's the structure that establishes your foundation for fundraising. Whereas fundraising is the direct activity you do to raise funds, fundraising is that part of that whole process that involves actions to generate revenues from a variety of sources. Okay, here's the second and my favorite legend. Fundraising is the tip of an iceberg. Most of our attention goes to the tip, asking for money, instead of that mammoth structure below the surface. Below the surface, there are two factors that lead to sound development practices and to ensuring your greatest impact. The first is the relationships that continuously strengthen connections between people and your mission. And the second is the solid organizational structures and practices that enable the organization to carry out its mission effectively. We sometimes become so desperate to fundraise that we don't attend to the structure, the planning, the processes as we should. Plus, it's easier to focus just on fundraising activities. And since there are at least 9 primary ways to bring in revenue to your nonprofit, you might be trying to do them all, or maybe a few, but you're trying to do them all by yourself. Or you're plenty aware that relationships and planning and processes are important, but you don't feel you have the time for all of it. All of that creates anxiety. Not understanding fund development as a team sport produces anxiety, and it will diminish your impact. Or maybe you do understand it as a team sport, but don't have the support from others in your organization that you really need to have. So that produces anxiety. One person cannot possibly build all the relationships necessary to fully support your nonprofit in the most impactful way. Or you may even have several folks that help with fundraising, but still neglect much of the planning and the processes that are necessary to build more significant relationships. The anxiety this all produces ensures that you will not have the motivation necessary to build those relationships or to fully develop those organizational processes you need to raise the most funds possible to effectively carry out your mission. Having a team that desires to learn and who will engage in planning will set you on the right road. So that brings us to the steps you need to take to ensure you have the knowledge, tools, and motivation to fundraise like a Rockstar. So the first step is to create your team. Now look, I recognize and know this step might possibly be your hardest step to take. And so I'm going to take a bit more time with this step. This is a passion of mine. So I hope you pick up on that passion. I promise you that it'll be downhill if you get this right. This step of creating a team applies to nonprofits with no paid staff, with 1 staff, or with 100 staff members. I think this can be the hardest step because of a few common issues we find in nonprofits. The first is one of those films I had you watch about working in silos. And if you didn't get to watch it, here's the 2-second version of it. when we were in elementary school, we got shoved into those rows. We weren't allowed to talk to one another. We took that separateness into the workplace, into our little cubicles, and we take it into nonprofits. We work in these little silos: fundraising, programs, communications, operations. This is called silo syndrome, and there have been years and years and years of research on this issue. And basically what the research says is this is an ineffective means of working, of completing our task, being productive, being effective. And the solution that will get you results is to get out of those silos and into teams. So there is that link in your toolkit for the, there's one about your staff, helping you practice with your staff, getting your staff into teams. I will tell you that the silo video and the staff video are from an older video series, the point of which is to get you used to working in teams, to practice in non-threatening ways that don't necessarily involve fundraising. My primary team building activity is to call a circle. And remember, I learned this and, oh no, you don't need that. Wait a minute. I don't know why it starts doing that all of a sudden. Anyway, because of in Rapid City, everything happened in circles up there. And throughout my career, I've used calling a circle as my primary means of team building, because in my experience, it's the most powerful, effective, and efficient means of enhancing your nonprofit's impact. Now, I'm gonna share another of Shannon's phrases, but I think calling a circle is the magic dust you need for just about every activity within your nonprofit. So I'm going to address this a bit more in step 3. A second reason I think that this step, building your team, is more difficult is you might suddenly run smack dab into another common issue, and that's this lovely picture of Brooklyn. This is a friend's dog. And this is how some board members feel about fundraising. And why don't they want to raise funds? Well, usually because they are limited in one or more of those 3 things: knowledge, tools, and or motivation. So let's talk about motivation for a minute. For anyone who walked into their first day on a job requiring them to ask for money, I don't think anybody walks in on the first day going, whoopee, I want to run out and ask for money, right? No one walks in feeling that asking for money is fun. In fact, asking for money can touch on our core security issues and bring up a ton of baggage. Whatever is triggered, it means that no one will automatically be motivated to ask for money. The only way to feel motivated and even fall in love with asking for money is by practicing and then doing. And the way to motivate folks to ask for money, I believe, is by working in circles. Again, we'll discuss more of that in step 3, but for now, just know that it's natural to feel fear and discomfort about asking for money, but there are ways to overcome it. The other reason that board members might feel this way about fundraising might be a lack of knowledge, and this can also lead to a lack of motivation. So what knowledge might be missing, and who is supposed to provide that knowledge? That issue can be a sticky wicket for many nonprofits, but it is one that's close to my heart. Oh, sorry. This last Tuesday, I addressed some of the factors impacting the relationship between board and staff relevant to raising funds together, as well as sometimes the lack of knowledge of the complexity of fiduciary duties. So first of all, if you missed that video, go back to the Facebook group and scroll to the live video from April 13th. This is an issue, like I said, this is huge for me. And I even did a blog series on this. I hope you've read it or will read it. It's linked in your toolkit. And I have to tell you something that I once was told by a nonprofit board president, and as a consultant, I've heard executive directors say that their board members have said this. And so I'm going to just quote it. And the quote is this: I've had the board chair said to me, "We are not a fundraising board." So let me tell you, that's a legal impossibility. There's no such thing as boards that are fundraising boards and those that are not. All nonprofit board members have a legal fiduciary responsibility to ensure adequate resources for their nonprofits. But what that means is where the confusion lies, and it is a big topic. Does it mean that if they contribute funds, that satisfies the responsibility? Does it mean they have to make personal asks? What does it mean? And again, it's a giant, giant issue, and I would invite you to book a free strategy session with me if you have any issue with your board's fundraising. I can also evaluate during that strategy session the nature of your relationship with your board. I've also linked you to video 7 in that series about bringing your board onto the team. I think that's about 8.5 minutes long. The only thing about that, because that video is so old, it's got the wrong link in it. So I've put the right link into your toolkit about setting it. It's not called a discovery call anymore. It's called a strategy session. All right, now keep in mind, just a second, sorry, that most of you are already in the midst of running your nonprofit. You're busy with programs, communications, and fundraising already. And that was the issue for me as an executive director. I always felt I had too little time, staff, and money to engage in those under the tip of the iceberg activities like I knew I needed to. Remember Sisyphus? Sisyphus is punished in the underworld by the god Zeus, who forces him to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. Every time Sisyphus nears the top of the hill, the boulder rolls back down. The great thing about being Sisyphus is that you always have your work cut out for you. You always have something to do. As long as you are striving and pushing and trying hard to do something that can never be done, you know who you are. But is that healthy? Is it effective? And I think we all know the answer is no. It's hard to stop doing that, though. But how do you stop doing that? How do you take those steps to basically give yourself a break, step back, create the team that is going to help you, is going to relieve that anxiety? Well, I had this friend up in Rapid City. She was a counselor, and she'd often say to me, "Nancy, if you don't put yourself on your calendar, you won't take care of yourself." I found this to be true in my nonprofit work. I always felt I had 100 balls in the air at the same time. So I had to learn to put myself on my own calendar. In other words, I had to allow myself scheduled time to step back, take a breath, and follow these steps, especially to practice and work in teams. And I did a lot. When I started at Travis Audubon, they had, I want to say, about 12 committees doing the work of the organization. And they had been all volunteer for about 52 years. And so at first it was like herding cats, but the first 18 months that I was there, I worked on team building. And as a result, was able to finally form the infrastructure, the processes, the structure, all that stuff that was needed to really actually be way more effective as an organization, but also to raise funds effectively. Really, though, in truth be told, in the beginning of trying this, I'd become anxious and think I was going backwards, but I wasn't. Once I began practicing taking the time, I found that my work actually got easier and there was more of a flow to my work and definitely far less anxiety. There's definitely lots of team building activities you can find on the internet, but I want to caution you that you always need to modify them to make them a fit for your people and your organization. Using those videos I've supplied to you, that help you to bring your folks into teams, will allow you to practice working in teams in a non-threatening way. It'll feel scary sometimes and uncomfortable. And I say to that, please trust the process. Now I want to take a second to guarantee a result. And I noticed that Cynthia's here and she knows why this is kind of a weird thing for me to do. Cynthia is also a lawyer. And as lawyers, we know you never guarantee a result. It's unethical as a lawyer to guarantee a result. I have taken that ethical principle into everything I do. I don't guarantee results, except for guess what? I'm going to do it for the first time I've ever done it as a consultant or nonprofit leader. I am going to guarantee a result. Here it is. If you work in teams, even if you have no paid staff and only a few board members and maybe just a few volunteers, making that shift, working in teams, using circles will absolutely increase your capacity and impact. Let me say that again. Working in teams will increase your capacity and impact. I can guarantee that because first, there's so much research out there that validates this. And because in the fundraising realm, there's nothing more important than bringing more people to the table. I can safely say this with over 30 years of nonprofit experience. Ooh, okay, guaranteed results, Cynthia. Yeah. All right, step 2. Now we'll take a little break because this is an easy one. Developing your stewardship plan. Well, you know what stewardship it's gratitude, right? That's what it is. It's all about gratitude. And this is my favorite quote about gratitude. Gratitude is the open door to abundance. This step, the reason why it's right up there in the beginning, next to team building in importance, is it's critical because of most work involved in all fundraising occurs after the gift is received. Having a plan in place to thank the donor appropriately will strengthen your relationship and inevitably lead to your next gift. Now, in the toolkit, I gave you a generalized stewardship plan that'll work great with most of your individual donor programs. But listen, you do need to modify that stewardship plan for various purposes. For instance, I have a mini course on monthly giving programs, and I always suggest and I provide a modified stewardship plan for monthly givers because they should feel like a special group of people, right? You also, people forget this all the time, should have a stewardship plan for grant funders. For some reason, we don't think of them as people, but you know what? They are. So we need a special one for them. In other words, use the generalized plan and then start modifying for the revenue stream that you're using. One other thing about gratitude, we often forget it's important to extend gratitude to our boards, our staff, and our volunteers. I used to do a once a year appreciation event for our volunteers. We had little gifts that we solicited from restaurants and such. And we had games that we played, and of course we had food. Always a good idea to show your volunteers appreciation, but don't forget your board and your staff. You know what? Even a thank you card goes a long way. So just don't forget gratitude. Very important. So believe it or not, that was step 2. See how short that was? All right, here we go. Step 3. Step 3 is to collect your stories. This step is going to help you gather your tribe, and plus you need stories for all 9 revenue streams. You need to be comfortable and compelling when you talk about the work of your nonprofit. Collection and telling of stories is the gateway to the motivation to ask for money. In my major gift program, I call a circle on the first day of training before we ever make an ask to have the board, staff, and volunteers tell their story about their connection to their nonprofit. I have them get in touch through the types of questions I ask with their passion for the mission, which allows them to begin tapping into the motivation to make a face-to-face ask. In other words, you take that passion with you on a face-to-face ask. Now, when I lived and worked in Rapid City, everything did happen in circles. And when I served on the board of the Restorative Justice Center, we facilitated victim offender mediations. We had a contract with the federal government to handle their juvenile criminal sentencing mediations. The federal government used us for their circle sentencing practices because they were so accustomed to the needs of the Native American population. And I was always astounded at the power of circles, and certainly surprised that even the federal government was using them. If you have local board members, staff, and volunteers, if everyone wears a mask, you can still work in circles. But if you have scattered board members or staff, then you're going to want to learn everything you can about working in circles and pull in some of the elements into your Zoom sessions. Cynthia and I were trying to come up with some ways to use a talking stick in a Zoom session. And she thought maybe using the spotlight feature on Zoom, but we'll have to talk a little bit more about how you can use these circle principles in Zoom sessions. So here's the, oops. For the next 30 days, I've made my video Calling a Circle available for free on my YouTube channel. And it is the most powerful way to learn the art of story collection and storytelling, but most importantly, to create a culture of storytelling in your nonprofit. This brings me to a commercial break. 4 steps to powerful storytelling. To use story to gather your tribe, to develop a culture. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Oh, whoops. Just a second, guys. Sorry. Yes, to gather your tribe, to develop a culture of storytelling and learn the art of story collecting and telling, I invite you to use a link in your toolkit for my storytelling mini course. That link gives you the discount, only available until May 15th. Now, Cynthia was my beta tester for my storytelling course, so I'm going to ask her if she would mind saying a few words about this storytelling course.
Of course. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks for giving me access to that. And it was really, really helpful. I think the thing that I enjoy most about it is that I've always had this thought, even when I started, that we have to develop a culture of storytelling. I've worked in nonprofits for a long time, and I've seen many times where people are just scrambling for stories. Hey, anyone have any good stories? Bring me the stories, write your stories here, right? And that's not really a culture of storytelling. I seen something where someone had kind of like a speaking panel or something like that, like where they were engaging their clients as speakers in the long term and showing that beautiful journey of them becoming advocates. And so a culture of storytelling is really this whole other element. And what was great about what I learned with the storytelling program that Nancy provided is that you can take these very practical steps. And that's something that I really appreciate, is having that practical nature of how you can get from A to B, right? Like, how can you get from this place where you want a story, a culture of storytelling, or you know that stories are important, to a place where you actually have a robust sampling of stories that you can go to. And I can say that it's already helping me in every aspect. So just talking to major donors, for example, they might say something that harkens to a story that you've collected. And when you do it well, when you follow the steps that are outlined there, then you will really be able to plug them into so many places. And it really does enrich everything that you're trying to do, whether it be monthly giving campaigns, end of year giving campaigns, appeals, major gifts work, capital campaign work. In every way, storytelling really is at the heart of things. And so I can't encourage y'all enough to check out this storytelling product that Nancy has put together. It's really great, really practical. I'm definitely going to be implementing things from it right away. So thanks again, Nancy.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia's just been a giant help for me in taking the time to watch that course. And there are a couple of things she pointed out that I'll tell you about in a second, but I wanted to say that something's going to change, and thank you to Cynthia for suggesting this. Right now, that course is available until May 15th as a self-paced course. But then I'm going to remove it after May 15th and turn it into a live 4-week course. So, each lesson will have videos to watch, but then there'll be an hour or so of time with me and a cohort of nonprofit leaders also taking the course, so that you get that specialized attention and the help and support with implementation. So it'll be a live course, I believe beginning in June. You'll get some kind of notice about that. The cost will be $150. So if you want the self-paced course at $67, you need to take it before May 15th and use that special link in the toolkit. The two things that she noticed that I wanted to point out is there in the first lesson, there's a stop sign on one of the slides that says, please stop and watch these two bonus videos. Those two, one of them is the silos video and the other is the circles video, both of which are available also on that YouTube channel linked in your toolkit. But Cynthia mentioned that you don't want to stop in the middle because it's hard to kind of go back and forth between finding the bonus videos and then back into the course. And the other thing she pointed out is when I think it's in the fourth step where I'm talking about storytelling and graphics and photographs to use with your storytelling. I think I talk about using Canva as your graphic design program. And it was $12.95 for me, but for nonprofits, it's free. And I did not put that in there. So when I clean up the course a little bit later for the live one, I'll thank you to Cynthia for pointing all that out. When you collect a story from a founder, a board member, a volunteer, a client, or clients that you serve, those stories will be the meat of all 9 types of fundraising appeals. It is the stories of your impact that you are passionate about. So the bottom line is that the motivation to fundraise will come in large part from your own story, your own passion. All right, now we're going to move on to step 4, which is gathering your data. All right, let me say a couple words about this. I think I want to talk about this. Let me tell you something. Mike McCoy, he's the trust officer with Meadows Foundation. For those, lots of you probably already know who he is. Years ago, when I was at Travis Audubon, he told me that, you know, when you submit your grant, there's a guy named Bruce who decides which pile you go into, the one that's going to be considered for the grant or not considered for the grant. And Mike told me, if you don't make Bruce laugh or cry on the first page of your grant, you're not going to be considered. So that's where your stories come in. Well, then a few years later, I was working at the Palace Theater and I talked to Mike again. I told him this wonderful story about a young woman in our youth education program at the Palace Theater. And he said, you're right, that's a great story. Yeah, it would go on the first page, just like I told you, but don't forget the data that tells me how that story relates to the broader community. How are your stories impacting the broader community? That's where step 4 comes in. Now, you gather and collect data for a whole lot of reasons, and you collect all types of data. You know, like you're getting started with the creation of a resource development plan. You need to have data about your prior fundraising efforts. There's a lot of reasons, right? In this step, we are talking about data collection as it relates to being able to demonstrate the impact of your programs. This is from the Palace Theater when I worked up there. We had a professional, what do you call those people, like a program evaluator come in and help us with this, how we wanted to gather our data. And so the first thing you have to be able to articulate what need of your community you're addressing, the outcome you expect or do see, like an increase in skills and knowledge specific or something specific to solving that problem that's an outcome. Indicators are the ability to do something your program taught or provided them. And then measures, how are you going to measure it? Are you going to have evaluation forms, pre and post quizzes? In your toolkit, I provided one small example of what that might look like. At the theater, we had 6 programs. This is from one of them that's in your toolkit. And it walks through each one of these, showing you how to use that. And remember, you have a team to help you with this step. You might have a paid program staff person or someone implementing your programs, or you might have 3 or more board members, at least one of whom can do some research and create a measurement tool. You might have someone with an education background that developed curriculum before with ways to measure the results of the curriculum. You're not going to know until you dig deeper through the use of those team activities, especially look again at that one about developing your team. That's a great, great video. Now, that brings me to something, and I want to introduce to you Jaden Beatty. She is going to be interviewed on Tuesday in her Facebook group, and her topic is called Data and Dollars. So Jaden, do you want to turn on your video and your mic and tell us what you're doing? What are you going to do on Tuesday?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm excited to chat with you all next Tuesday. We're really going to be talking about what I've found to be a successful formula that can help you determine how to utilize programmatic data and community data effectively, specifically in grant applications that will appeal to funders. So we'll be talking about how to work with your program staff to make sure you understand and can utilize data effectively, how to pick which data to highlight and how to highlight it, and how to work with your funders to know what data is going to be most effective in whatever ask you're making at that time. So excited to chat about that with you guys. My hope is that it'll be really practical advice that you could immediately implement no matter the size of your team or what your organization is up to. And we'll also have, a great Q&A opportunity to kind of talk together about different challenges you might be facing when it comes to data, because it is a very complicated process for most nonprofits, and there are a lot of challenges that come with it. So hopefully we'll get to talk together and maybe identify some solutions that could help you.
Jaden, I forgot to mention, and same with Cynthia, because I always figure everybody knows everybody. Jaden is the development director at Age of Central Texas. So please join us on Tuesday so you get to know Jaden a little bit better and hear her share her expertise on data and dollars. Thanks, Jaden. All right, the final step today is not that one. Just a minute. Sorry. Someday, you guys who know me know that technology is not my thing, right? Okay. So step 5 is developing your case for support. Simply stated, a case for support is a compelling presentation of your ask. There are 2 types of case statements. One is what you might include in your public relations materials. It's usually only about a page in length, and it includes who we are, what we do, and why it matters. I included the Travis Audubon case statement in your toolkit because it's my favorite one. I worked on it a little bit, but there was actually 4 of us that put together that 1-page document. Sometimes it's harder to squish, to get what you need said into a smaller space. And I was real impressed with what we all came up with. And those last 2 sentences especially, I think are very powerful. So take a look at that for an example of your public relations case for support. The other type of case statement is your primary case for support. It will include all of these elements. So let's go through each one of these. I call the first one an opening statement just because that old lawyer thing dies hard. I can't remember what this is supposed to be called. I don't even think it's an executive summary, but maybe it is. But okay, you get the idea, opening statement. This is where you will put a compelling story. Get the reader to emotionally invest right now. When I was in law school, we had to take a legal writing course, and he always used to say, go for the juggler. That's how he put it. But in other words, you hit them where it counts, right in the very beginning to hook them in with your opening statement. The next thing is your needs statement. This section addresses the needs of the community you serve. The opening statement illustrated the need with maybe 1 person, 1 pet, 1 acre preserved. But this section tells your reader that this is a big, important issue. Next is your program information. This is how you address the needs of the community. Make sure you use details. Don't just say we feed the hungry. Walk through how your program works. Then comes nonprofit basics. Here you're going to have your vision, mission, and values, and also you include your history or background, and I want to make a point about that. When I worked up at the Palace Theater, I just was taking a look at how they had done their grant applications, I read through a lot of their grants, and how funders always ask for background information or your history. And and this was not unique to the Palace Theater. They all say, well, you know, in 19 so-and-so, we did this, and then we did that, then we did this, and then we did that, and this is where we are now. Well, you know how boring that is. And you got to consider those people reading these things. They're reading hundreds and hundreds of them, and you don't want to put them to sleep. So here's what I did. Up in the box office at the Palace Theater, there was a bunch of scrapbooks that somebody had been putting together since about the, I don't know, 1930s or 40s, when it was a movie theater. And I found very cool things like how the usher had her first kiss with the concession stand guy, you know, and how, you know, how they built upon that story. So I started just pulling some of those together. I made it short and sweet, and that background became so much more interesting. So yeah, you don't have to be boring just because it's asking for your background, right? In the nonprofit basics is also where you describe why you're uniquely qualified to address the needs of the community. This might include your leadership, the design of your programs, the impact of your programs. This is where you bring the data, but don't be afraid to tie the data to stories here, like I just mentioned. You can also use charts and graphs and photographs. Definitely use those. Anything that's visual is often more helpful than words. Then comes your cost and funding. And again, a chart might be helpful here to show income and expenses related to all your programs. And remember that salaries and infrastructure are included in what it costs to implement your programs. You should also include a breakdown of how you are currently funded, your grants, your individual donors, events, and sponsors. And you can use pie charts or graphs, and any type of that kind of visual will be helpful. I could veer off into costs, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, stopping myself. Last one is, our second to last one is accomplishments and press. A lot of funders are asking for that now. So they might ask you to describe your accomplishments or recognition by media. Make sure to update that every time you have something new occur in this category. You actually always want to make sure you're rereading it and updating it. And then finally is how your reader can help. That's your call to action, and where you are specific with your request. Please give us $1 million, right? All right, so this broader case for support, you design it, and you want it to be lengthy, and put it up into your, you know, I talk a lot about story banks or places where you store the good stuff, right? That other people might have access to, at least viewing. Sometimes you might want to share. Anyway, you pull down from that document for various reasons, like your annual report, your grant applications. But you do need a case statement, a big one like this, because ultimately you'll need it for all 9 revenue streams. Now, as you become comfortable working in teams, you will become more attuned to that large structure under the tip of the iceberg that relates to planning, processes, and structures. And without planning, your nonprofit often must react to funding problems, shortfalls, or crises. Without planning, your nonprofit will face difficulties with sustaining program delivery and cannot expand or scale its programs. Planning allows for diversity in funding sources, which produces more opportunities and stability. Diversity in funding sources reduces dependency on single sources. Planning builds internal and external relationships, important to your nonprofit's success. Resource development planning allows your nonprofit to intentionally align its programs, fundraising, and communications for efficiency and impact. So what you're doing, you're building these teams, you're learning to practice in teams in non-threatening ways. And then as you get going with your teams, you have to learn who's good at what, because you need to start assigning tasks and you need to craft a resource development plan. So one thing you can do is download my document called Strategically Planning for Development. It's on my website, and it'll tell you how to herd the cats, how to get the right people doing the right thing for planning for development. So get started with that. And then as you're moving along, if you want my sample of a resource development plan, I believe there's a form on my website. You just fill out the form and then I send you the sample development plan. So, you know, that's pretty much, oops. Oh, okay. We're pretty much at the end until, well, we're going to ask questions here in 1 second. Just a minute, one back. You can read a description of the 4 steps to powerful storytelling on my website. So that's why this slide is there. It is also linked in your toolkit. All right. Now, next month, we will start drilling down into those 9 revenue streams. I think we're going to, no, I know we will start on developing an individual donor program. So here we are. I wanted to get done early. I'm going to stop my share for now and see what questions you might have. And can I get to my chat box? Oh, I can now. Yay. See, I can get to my chat box. I get excited about these small things in life. All right. Oh, start my video. Thank you, Shannon. See, she's such a good co-host. Where would I be without Shannon? All right. Anybody have questions or want to comment on how difficult it might be to pull a team together? Any other issues you might have?
I'll start by just sharing my experience. Starting off, trying to build teams, I think is difficult in that you want to make the most of the teams, right? And you really have to have the known structures and know where your organization needs the help, because in any nonprofit, you'll find people that are, you know, helpers and givers and doers, and they want to do stuff. But it's up to you to really organize them in an effective way. And so I think that, you know, there can be many conversations about what that looks like. But I think that one of the first ones that has to happen is, what structures do you have for teams, you know, like that are already established, I guess. And so, you know, do you have in your bylaws how to like set up a new committee, for example? Can you do ad hoc committees, et cetera, et cetera? Those are all things that I think I kind of struggled with at first, where I was just like, we have committees, but what do they do? And do we need more?
Right.
Do we need a bunch of committees because we have so many, you know, events or these different things? And so you really have to just take a critical eye to like what has always been done, I think, and figure out, you know, maybe things need to change a lot. Maybe they don't need to change a lot. Maybe they just need to be tweaked. So I would say come in open-minded and be willing to you know, be wrong with your first assumption, because you definitely have to feel it out. And the other thing is that teams are always changing too, right? And so it's almost like you have to continuously be fluid in my experience. And Nancy, if you have more to add to that, I think just thinking of like a new, you know, a new development professional or executive director even, and how they can come in and really try to get a wrangle on that thing. I would love to hear any more thoughts you can add to that.
That one video, I think it's video number 3 in that series about staff, bringing your staff into teams. There's an activity in there that's called mind mapping. And when I did that at Travis Audubon, here's what I found out is the existing committees, yeah, they were okay, but they weren't as effective for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons showed up in the mind mapping. So for instance, I had a, what was she? She started as an office administrator, I guess. And when you do the mind mapping and you have like flip charts and you go around in a circle with like, hopefully you have a room that you can do this in, you put the flip chart on the wall and you do your mind mapping. And you find out what people are good at that you had no clue they were either interested in, that they were good at, that they had these skills. And that was like a big eye opener for me, because as it turned out, that woman I had hired as an office administrator, and it was just this little teensy part of a resume that I don't know even if I noticed it. She had previously been an editor, and it was a big time editor, only she didn't emphasize it when she applied for the job. Turned out, oh, she can edit all this writing I'm doing for all these purposes. So I started having her edit, and she's one of those people that's magic that can squish everything you know, and it sounds wonderful. So that was the first thing I noticed. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, you know what? She can write. Ah, grant writer. So see, that was the thing I didn't even know until we did this mind mapping activity. And I think, as you said, Cynthia, you have to be open to that, you know, instead of putting people in these little slots and assuming that's what they're good at and that's how you know them.
I think, Kathy, sorry, that's my day job, Nancy, that most of us, I would assume, are participating in Amplify Austin. Raise your hands if your organization does. Okay. And even if you don't, I find that board members, they want to serve. We all know they want to serve. They don't want to raise funds. So we have to take them by the hand. And formerly being in sales, I'm just used to, like, you know, it's just part of what I have to do. And so what we do annually, because it is our biggest annual fundraiser, we do have a match from Indeed usually. They've been very gracious of a 5,000K match, which is actually a lot for our little organization. And so, you know, I set up their profiles for them. I send them sample emails that they could send out to prospective donors, and also for their social posts, for LinkedIn, for Facebook, for Instagram, whatever they're on, and just kind of shepherd them through the process and try to be their number one cheerleader. We give them reasonable goals. $500 to me is a reasonable goal. And this year, our fairly new board blew it out of the water. So I think if we can just kind of cultivate our board members and just get them, you know, to where they're comfortable. I know that when we're on Facebook, you know, somebody says it's my birthday, so could you contribute to this cause instead of, you know, wishing me happy birthday, whatever. People donate to the causes that are important to their friends and to their colleagues, etc. So I may not necessarily be donating to Project Transitions, even though I think it's an amazing organization, but Cynthia asked me to, you know, so yeah, I can throw $25, then that makes sense. So it's that thing of cultivating those relationships and then keeping in touch with your donors, you know, thank them. I've made sure that all of our board members, I said, look, they contributed to your profile page for Amplify Austin. You need to make sure that you're thanking those people directly.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's just a matter of, once your board members start thinking that way, that it's not this daunting thing over their heads, that it's more like just make those connections and ask people to help you, and they will.
I like the word you use, Shannon, shepherd your board members. And I've got some questions over here in the box. One from Sharon that says, what do you do when your board says they've tapped out their network? See, when I do the major gift training, first of all, you have a larger network than just your individual board member networks, right? You have all your previous donors. You even have lapsed donors. And so in my bigger course, the one that I think Cynthia took the bigger course, I do one training in the beginning with the board where they're learning to share their story and how they talk about, you know, how they talk about their connection and all that. And then on the next training, no, wait, that's wrong. Back this up. The first training I do is how to have them all make phone calls together during a 2-week period. This is an 8-week major gift program. So they make phone calls, and in the training, I teach them how to deal with the objections that they might get. So they get comfortable. So that's one thing I want to say is when you practice, you raise that comfort level of reaching out to people maybe you've never reached out to before, right? And so I have maybe a list of 12 objections that I have them practice responding to before you ever do anything else. Then the next piece is working in the circle to talk about the passion. And then the final piece is practicing the 4 stages of the ask when you actually go make the ask. And this might be people, when they say they're tapped out, Sharon, this could be people they've never met before. That's why you always go in teams. One person that has probably made a personal ask before, and one person that's brand new to it that maybe can take the notes and start getting comfortable with the concept. So yeah, it's not something that can happen off the cuff usually, but it is something I believe Shannon has the right word that you can shepherd board members into in various ways to get them more comfortable. A lot of it is practicing, and a lot of it is having that mentor, that person that's shepherding you. Okay. Oh, another question here is from, let me go up. Oh, Samantha. Let's see. What would you say is the best way to move beyond your current network of donors and friends and expand into the general public? And then she says small events. You know what, Cynthia, what do you think about that question? Because we all know that events end up costing the most in time and money. What would you say?
I would say if you don't have one, then definitely create and expand on a major gifts program, because that is where you're going to get, it's the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the folks are going to give you 80% of the funding, and there's just no better return on investment. Events are, in my mind now, really more of almost like a branding opportunity, an opportunity to engage new corporate sponsors into the major gifts program. Like even for corporate sponsors and grants, I think of them as, you know, being targets for my major gifts program. I don't know if that's sanctioned, but that's the way I've really gotten around to it, because at the end of the day, they're all people. And you're either getting, you know, high gifts or lower gifts, and small events are a way to get a bunch of small gifts. And it is a way to engage people, but there's so many other ways to engage people, like your volunteer program. Do you have programs where you can bring the community in remotely, virtually, or in person? Because if you do, and you get people to put some skin in the game, you know, they're really going to be invested in you in a big way. And that's a way to expand your circle as well. There's so many other ways besides events to engage people, even with these giving days, even with like a monthly giving campaign, even with social media work. Like you can engage those like smaller dollars or those donor acquisition opportunities. And that way, if what you're trying to do is gain more, you know, just more donors, period. But if you really are concerned about funding your work, I would say you can't go wrong with investing as much as you can afford to invest into a major gifts program.
I agree. And
awesome, thank you.
And even just having the basics of an individual gift program, maybe even a good monthly giving program, not just an option, but a monthly giving program where you're nurturing these people to build up into major donors as well. You guys know that story about that. I can't remember which nonprofit this was, but there was a new executive director who came and noticed that there was this elderly woman who was giving $35 a year for their annual appeal and had been doing that for 20 years. And she invited her to coffee. And the next thing she knew, they got something like $500,000 from this woman. You know, you can't say enough about nurturing your donors. And as I said previously, most of the work comes after you get the gift. That inevitably leads to.
And the other thing I would say too, I don't know if you have a CRM or anything like that, but you know, you mentioned in your question that, you know, you're talking about the board members and they have their direct contacts, and then it feels like that's the end of it. If anyone has ever given any money to your organization, they're a prospect, right? So yeah. Like if you have a CRM, if you have any, like, this is what Nancy's talking about, but like, go for it. What we started doing was lapsed donor letters. Nobody was doing those. And we have, all of our numbers are up on re-engagement, on reactivation, and just, we have more donors this year than we did last year. And, you know, and that's pretty impressive already. But it's really just small things, like things that are not crazy. I think the major gifts program is like the big major thing you can do. And then there's so many other small things you can do just to re-engage people. It's just putting energy into getting to know those people basically and re-engaging them.
That's another thing I forgot to say, is that my monthly giving mini course is also available to Meetup attendees for that $67, but I'm going to take that down too and turn that one into a live course, because I think it's just much more helpful when you have a cohort of people that are participating and that you're accountable to. Cynthia and I were talking about this last week, or sometime maybe even this week, about how, boy, you know, when you work for nonprofits, you're busy constantly. And so it's easy to put off. Like if you have a self-paced course, it's easy to say, I'll get to it later. But if you have a live course and you're meeting once a week, you're accountable for the work. So Cynthia is the one who's talked me into changing these from self-paced to live. So we're going to do that on the monthly giving program and the storytelling one. And then eventually I'll do the major gift. My big course that I have that Cynthia took is about the board. It's about the bringing the board into fundraising, and then having that team with your board engaged together in a major gift program. So now what Cynthia helped me realize is I need to separate those, because that board thing is such a giant issue. So I need to separate that out and do the board, leadership, staff, relationship, fundraising issue separately, and then do the major gift campaign separately. So that's to come. Now, remember though, these questions you guys are asking are really helpful, and you can book that 30-minute session with me, which usually goes 60 minutes for free, because I can never keep it to 30 minutes. What else? Who else? Does anybody have anything? Where I was hoping we would end up early, but it's up to you guys. Do you have other issues? Or I really want to encourage you to book that an appointment with me, so you get that free help. And also, I don't know, I think all of you might be in the Facebook group, but if you're not, make sure you get in it, because that's where you'll get those live interviews too. 15 minutes of your time. That's it. Anybody else? And my chat box went away.
I just wanted to throw in, Nancy, the cohort model, the live model that you're moving to is also, I've found so helpful in that you really learn from everybody else. Like things are always changing, you know, and you just hear about the challenges that they encountered. Maybe they're ahead of you, maybe they're behind you in whatever progress you're making. But what's great is that if they're still coming up behind you, you have something to offer them. If they're ahead of you, then it's like, great, you're thinking about something that you haven't encountered yet, or that you may encounter, that you are encountering right now. So it's really, really a rich experience in that way.
I can't thank you enough for suggesting that, because, you know, when I was an executive director, I felt pretty isolated a lot.
Oh yeah.
You know, I find this cohort idea very powerful and helpful. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Sometimes I get into my box of thinking and I forget to think outside of the box. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Shannon. Let me just ask a few of you. Molly, where are you? You're from
I'm with the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. Our executive director, Leah, has been on various webinars like this. And this is just, I'm going to be moving into more of a development role officially in August. So I'm just doing some prep work now to get my footing. So thank you so much for letting me be part of this. It's been really helpful.
And that's an organization dear to my heart. I was a criminal defense lawyer for years. So yes, glad you're in that area. Okay, let's see. Samantha, what about you?
Hi, yes, I represent 1810 Ministries. We're based in Dripping Springs, but our area of impact is actually Central American disadvantaged kids. So we can't really participate usually in Amplify Austin, because it's usually about Austin and local people wanting to get involved locally. But that was a great tip. So yes, I echo. This has been one of the best trainings that I've been to. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Samantha. Yay, I love to hear that. It makes me when I get really depressed about the fact that do I want to keep doing this. Thank you, Samantha.
Oh no, thank you.
Jill, how about you?
Hello. I am currently on the board of a local synagogue as their VP of Fundraising and Development. And we have spent 2 years strategizing to figure out a way how to hire a development director. They also do not have an executive director. So the fundraising for the community is very heavily built upon volunteers and wrangling cats and the board. And all of this information today has been extremely helpful. Lots of great resources, and I appreciate you.
Hey, Jill, which synagogue is it?
Congregation Agudas Achim. It's on the Dell Jewish Community Center.
Would you send me would you send me a link? When my daughter and I moved here, we went to the Synagogue of the Hills in Rapid City. Rapid City has one synagogue, serves 34 families, that's it. So I've never really found one. So send me that link, okay?
Sure, happy to.
Okay.
Phil, I have a question for you. Do you know Barry Silverberg, who's the head of the Center for Nonprofit Studies at ACC? He helped raise the funds for the Dell Center there, for the Jewish Community Center. I'll put my email in there for you, and email me, and I'll make an email introduction of you and Barry to one another, because he would probably have the kind of contacts that you would need for those two roles.
Okay, thank you. That's awesome.
Okay, three more people that haven't been here before, real quick. Jan, well, no, Jan's been here several times, but Jan, say hi to everybody and tell them what you do.
Hi, I'm on the board of Funeral Consumers Alliance and also on the board of Native Plant Society of Texas. And right now we're in the process of hiring our first ever executive director. So fundraising is a very good issue for the Native Plant Society. Yeah.
Oh, for the Native Plant Society. Okay.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Funeral Consumers Alliance will stay all volunteer.
Yeah.
Forever. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yes, it is. It is.
All right, John, how about you?
Hey everybody, I'm with Austin Clubhouse. We're a nonprofit for adults living with mental health diagnoses, and folks come in, volunteer, and kind of help run the clubhouse. And through building relationships with the staff and helping through the meaningful work, there's like a recovery process. So we're internationally based, so there's clubhouses kind of all over the world following the model. And I'm technically a program staff, but I do a bit of the communications and the development work. And so just excited to be here. This was a really great resource, and I really enjoyed this. So thank you for having me.
Yay, thank you, John. Thank you for joining us. Garrick, are you here? We don't have your video. I don't know if you can hear us or not. Maybe not. All right. Okay, well, I'm always all for ending a little bit early if we can. Next month, we will do the development of an individual donor program. And who was it? It was Sharon, she left. You know that age-old question, how do you find new donors? Let's talk a little bit about that too, because it's a weird little issue. Where's the money? Where's the new money? But we'll start, and as I said, there's a whole number of programs under individual donors. So we'll see how that kind of works out. Anyway, I'm very grateful to all of you, and thank you for the kind words. Thank you for spending your time. Hugs to everybody. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.